know who the leaders are that step up. I think, a lot of people sort of say that it's trivial that he stayed in Kiev when the Russian military invaded. To me, it's not trivial at all. I think that's a truly heroic act to stay when nobody knows what's going to happen and all the experts are saying Kiev is going to be taken. To stay as a leader in that same place where you were the night before, like working, and not flee when the CIA, everybody's telling you to flee. To stay there like a bad motherfucker and actually go outside and film yourself speaking to the nation that we're going to win this. We're going to hold strong. That's an insane thing to do. And maybe it does require, it's a Trump-level insanity, right? It's similar to me to the Trump standing up when there's still bullets flying and saying, fight, 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 right? Where does that come from? I don't know. But most people don't have that.
Right.
And it's nice it was refreshing. It was refreshing when you see that. Holy fuck, yes, we want that guy.
Yeah.
And he really united a nation. The nation was fractured. He was actually not popular at all up to that war because the policies he was trying were not working.
What policy specifically?
So so there's stuff that was working. I don't know the internals of the Ukrainian politics that well, but so he won in 2019 based on his desire to fight corruption and to modernize Ukrainian digital system, which he did very successfully. It's actually super interesting. You can they have an app called Dia, which your passport, all your identifications, all appified, which I don't understand why the United States doesn't have that. You can update your license. You can get your license instantly. So it's like the 21st century version of what government should work like. The reason they did that is it's a way to fight corruption. It's a way, whenever you have paperwork, there's a place for corruption to seep in. So he was very serious about fighting corruption. And that's the other thing is there is corruption in Ukraine. There's not as much as people perceive. But it's a serious problem. Especially
is it less now than before?
What I see, I want to be careful here because I don't, it's very difficult to know. The perception, there's a serious concern about corruption. In a time of war, there's always going to be more corruption. The United States spent $9 trillion on the war in Afghanistan and Iraq and the Middle East. After 9/11, on that part of the world, they spent $9 trillion and it's growing. Do you think all that money, you've had a lot of guests on this program talking about how that money was used. There's a lot of shady shit that happened.
Oh, yeah.
War breeds corruption. This is one of the reasons you should be concerned about the military-industrial complex is because that money is just not used well.
Right.
But that's all. That's a discussion. The reality of corruption in Ukraine is it should be dealt with after you make peace. All the problems, the elections were suspended too. The ideas of democracy. There is censorship in Ukraine now. All of those ideas all of those things cannot be fixed until the war is ended. The reason there is censorship now in Ukraine is because it's a war. You can't. The ideas of democracy, in part, have to be suspended during a war to effectively fight that war. This is the whole idea of martial law. The United States has this. You don't fuck around. You have to win the war. When your land is invaded, you have to. Everybody has to be focused on this. The problem is it's a slippery slope. When all the media channels are being controlled, and the president and everybody is so invested in quote unquote winning the war, then where are the critical voices that say we need peace? Right? They're coming from the outside, but you need that. The thing is, it's a really complicated tension, right? During the war with martial law, you do want to suspend elections, potentially. It's a really difficult trade-off. The United States has the same thing. If we were to be invaded I don't know by who. This is not, if Canada invaded, I don't want to make a joke out of this, but there's going to be a yeah.
That'd be a quick fight.
Yeah, exactly. But like there would be a martial law where elections would be delayed or suspended and so on. So all those criticisms, all those concerns can only be dealt with once you make peace.
Yeah.
And in terms of corruption, there's a lot of people that know Zelensky well, and this has been my impression, having met him. I don't think and I've not heard anybody that knows him well say that he's personally corrupt. And this is really important. Like, he himself is not personally corrupt, and he legitimately is fighting corruption. Now, he's in a system that has corruption. Russia has corruption. It's really difficult to weed out corruption. But he legitimately, at least to me, that's really important, that he, as a single human being, and the people really close around him, like really close. Corruption starts to seep in, of course, when you go further out. But in that direct human being, that he is not personally corrupt. He, like financially speaking, he singularly believes in the idea of Ukraine as a sovereign nation, and he's willing to die for that idea. That is his strength, and that is also his weakness when it's time to make peace.
When you are preparing to do something like this, and you are, you're doing your research, you're getting ready to go do it, what are your concerns other than your own physical safety, of course? But like, what is your, like, ultimately, what's your concerns? What are your goals when you're setting out to do this? Because this is very different than any other kind of podcast interview. There's no other format really where a world leader in the middle of a huge international conflict is going to sit down for 3 hours and talk to an American scientist, which is weird too, right? It's like, why are you doing it? You know what I mean? Like, why this guy who works in AI just decides he's going to start a podcast. The podcast becomes very successful, and all of a sudden he's like, I'd like to talk to everybody. I'd like to go over and talk to Zelensky and talk to Putin, and everybody's like, why you? What the fuck are you doing? So you get a lot of that.
Yeah.
And then unfortunately for you read the comments, so you get sucked into all that negativity.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to say there. First of all, on the comments side, I always have a little Joe Rogan on my show saying, don't read the comments.
Don't read the comments.
And in this situation, it's especially intense.
Yeah.
I should say, like, privately, after I did a conversation with Zelensky, every single person that knows the situation well, knows me personally, has written to me, and it's all been really positive. Like, really positive. Almost like in the desert wanting water positive. Because there's a lot of voices that are afraid to speak that want peace.
Sure.
But online, and this is something we talked about offline a little bit, there's just like these like swarms of people that are like...
Not even necessarily people.
I don't want to sort of go too far in that territory, assuming that anybody who criticizes me is a bot.
No.
but there is
I'm not saying that, but there's an enormous element of that's real. Whether it's bots or whether it's hired people, paid propagandists, the conversation is not a pure conversation between people expressing their ideas. There's a lot of propaganda online, and it's very confusing to try to discern what the percentage is. You know, we've talked about this a bunch of times on the podcast, but there was a former FBI analyst who estimated that it's on Twitter alone. This is before the purchase. He believed it was around 80%. So 80% fake accounts. 80% not just propaganda, like government propaganda, but most certainly corporations are hiring people to do similar things. I'm sure there's companies that will do that for public figures, actors, people that are involved in conflict. This is part of the Blake Lively dispute, is that she's accusing that Justin Baldoni actor of an organized attack on her.